rain garden was funded initially by the Pioneer Valley Planning Association as part of a grant to the city of Springfield to work on water quality. And the way that we talked about it does that is through channels that collect the water that runs off of part of this roof, and it directs the water into a primary basin, then a longer swale along that runs parallel to the road or parallel to the fence. And the idea is that instead of that water running directly onto the sidewalk, picking up all of the oils, residues, whatever it also brings from the roof, and then running directly into the storm drain where it then enters directly into the river, instead we're bringing it into a basin where it will infiltrate, and that the roots from those plants, the soil, hopefully that is a living soil that is teeming with microorganisms, will filter some of those nutrients out, and then that water will actually go into the aquifer and recharge our natural water system rather than ending up carrying nutrients, soils, sediments, etc. into the river. So that's the kind of physical structure of the rain garden here. And we talked about how this particular rain garden is sized larger than it needs to be so that in the case that this neighboring building also wanted to connect into the system, it could accommodate for that much water. So this week we're going to be thinking about the living part of the rain garden more. So we're going to be concentrating a little bit more on the planting that was introduced, the concept for how to create a successful rain garden that's planting, and then we're going to spend some time improving the plantings that are here, which look really fabulous for having been done 5 years ago. I have to say, I'm sure you've spent a little bit of time, the museum spent some time, there have been some pulses of energy here, some volunteers, and it's impressive. And also we did quite a bit of weeding last week with the folks who are here, and there's still some weeding to go. And there are some gaps where some plants haven't survived, or where plants have migrated, because each plant reproduces in a slightly different way. And so plants that reproduce by seed, they will naturally migrate through and find the places that they are most happy, and then open up gaps for other things. And that's part of a living landscape, that's part of a garden, and that we as the designers and the gardeners sometimes are put into a place where we have to make a decision. Do we want this plant to migrate over here, or do we want this plant to stay over there, and where is that okay? So we're going to be making some objective decisions, like there's a gap here, we need to fill this gap, and we're going to be making some subjective decisions today by saying, well, this is a great plant and this is a great plant, but we don't really want it all mixed up like this, because we also have a garden that wants to be aesthetic. Before we get sort of started about that, are there any sort of lingering or underlying questions about the rain garden, this rain garden, or the function of a rain garden before we get talking about plants? Okay, excellent. So what do you think is what's the primary purpose of the plants that we put into a rain garden?
Survive.
Yes, they do need to survive.
Soak up the water.
Sorry.
Soak up the water. Use water.
Yeah, they need to soak up the water. That's what we're providing them water so that they soak up the water before it runs off somewhere else. Yeah. So any other functions?
Look pretty.
They need to look pretty. That is true. We want them to look pretty, because you can have a functioning rain garden or detention basin, and we talked a little bit about this last week, that is just grass, that is turf grass. You can create a similar system for collecting water and infiltrating it and have it be grass if it's designed properly so that it can be maintained that way. But here we want something that is more beautiful. So primary function for the plants is to survive, to infiltrate water, and to hold the soil in place. Because by definition, a rain garden, in order to function, is not perfectly flat, right? So there's swales, there's a high point, there's a slope down, and then there's the bottom of the basin. And so when we're looking at designing a rain rain garden into 3 sections, and that tells us what characteristics we need to look for in the plants in order to make sure that these plants do their primary function, which is, as Sarah said, to survive. So we have a zone 1 of a rain garden, which is what we call the upper section. So that's going to be the highest part of the rain garden that creates the barrier that contains the water where the water is going. What are the characteristics that plants might need in order to survive in that outer upper section? Exactly.
Because the water will flow beneath them. They're basically holding the swale in place. They're the anchor plants to hold the shape of the garden.
To hold the shape of the garden, exactly. So when we think of rain garden, we think, oh, wet, water. We're not creating a swamp, right? There's a big difference between a rain garden and a wetland. Because this week, right now, it hasn't rained for a week. And so the rain garden is not going to be a very wet place until it rains. So exactly, so that zone 1, those plants need to actually be very, very drought tolerant because they're holding that top of the berm around, and they, even when it does rain and that basin fills up, they're going to get the least amount of water of all the plants in the garden. So zone 2 is that slope, that bank that comes down. So if we have the berm out here with the plants, then we have a slope, and then we have the bottom of the basin. So zone 2 is this slope. So what would the characteristics for the plants be that we need to find in order for them to survive in zone 2?
They have to have like a good root base so they're not moving.
Excellent. Yep. They need to hold the soil in place. So that's our topography here. That's our slope. What about moisture?
They have to retain the moisture underground is traveling downward. They have to retain whatever is flowing past it to some degree.
So they want to be able to, when it actually rains, hold the soil in place. But maybe they also want some pretty deep roots. Because maybe they also need to go down a little farther to get to the moisture that's in the ground. Yeah. So those are the plants that are like our mid-level garden, like moist plants. And it's great to have a mixture of taproot plants and shallow-rooted plants on that slope. So one of the things that is sort of the invisible level of design, right, is really thinking about that. Like, how do we diversify height and color and texture above ground for the parts of the plants that we see, but understanding the root structures for different plants and how they can play together, where a tap-rooted plant and a shallow-rooted plant can share the same space without competing for nutrients, and they can serve different functions in the same place because their roots don't actually occupy the same space, even if the upper parts, are similar height or a similar color. So that's a really important part of designing a successful rain garden, is understanding what the structure of the plant is underneath the soil. So then we have our bottom of our basin, and that's the part that it makes the rain garden the rain garden. And what are the characteristics? So that's zone 3. So what are the characteristics of the plants that we need to survive in zone 3?
Like the water.
They need to be able to survive being inundated with water. Yeah, that's their primary purpose. So they're not going to be wet all the time. They're not wetland plants, but they need to be able to survive 24 hours at least of water filling that basin and infiltrating slowly. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself really quickly to the group?
I'm Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, welcome. Great. So we have the 3 different zones, and the primary purpose is for those plants to survive. But it's a garden. We can do all kinds of other things with gardens. So what are some other ways, if you were going to just choose plants out in the world from millions and millions of plants, you can decide what other functions a garden is going to serve other than just a rain garden? What are some other things that a garden can do for a landscape besides survive.
If they're gonna pollinate with some of the birds and animals. I don't know if those match up with pollinator plants with the rain plants.
Absolutely, we can look for that overlap. So that Venn diagram, we know that the native flora and fauna for our regions have evolved to coexist. And so if we want to support the native birds and butterflies in our region, then if we select from the plants that are native to our region, then we can provide them with habitat. And that might be pollen. It might also be leaves. If there's caterpillars, like we always forget, it's easy to forget that butterflies were caterpillars at one point and they needed some leaves to munch on. And so it could be leaves. It could be stems. There are native bees that bore holes into hollow stalks and stems of plants, and that's where they overwinter. And so when we plant plants that have that kind of pithy stalk, and we let those overwinter, and we wait until March or April to cut them down, then we're providing the winter habitat for those bees that like to bury in, and that's how they survive the winter, is in those pithy stalks. And so we've done that here in the garden. For the folks who've been here, working here, which plants do you identify that are already here that might that serve that purpose of pollinator or native habitat? Huh?
The grasses, they've got all those hollow stems and grasses. The Joe Pye does that too. The
Yep.
Joe Pye is a great pollinator plant. Catmint, which is that purple out there, is just, you can have 20 species of flying insects on those ones. And you've got the butterfly.
I was just gonna say, Jennifer, here's your moment. It's shining.
So it was designed, when it was originally designed, it was designed with a lot of pollinator plants in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. What's another way that we can design, like what's another function we could select from another group of plants?
These are pretty. Those are colorful.
They want to be beautiful. That makes a big difference, so that no matter what time of year you come here, it's beautiful. So we're people, we garden for ourselves, and at the very least, right? Like we want to enjoy the landscapes that we put time and money into creating. So absolutely. And we have some spring flowering things that are done. You can see here the patera is finished flowering, so those are the seed heads that are left behind, and those are some of the very earliest flowers. And then if we have a chance today to divide up some asters, which are another wonderful late blooming native flower. They haven't flowered yet, and they still haven't even barely budded up yet. So we want to look and think about the timing. I'll throw another one out there that I love. I also like to eat. There's some really wonderful plants that you can use for a rain garden that are also food for us. So I have a rain garden at my house that feeds right over to my blueberries because they love to be inundated with water, and they are zone 2 wetland plants. Blueberries are often found in the wild on the very edges of natural ponds and wetlands and streams. They love being inundated, and they can also take it when it's dry. And so it's a perfect plant to put in a rain garden that we can enjoy or the birds can enjoy. There's several kinds of fruit trees. There's the alpine strawberry that I also have at my house that is a wild strawberry that has a very strong flavor. It's a little smaller than the strawberries that you get commercially, and it doesn't spread with runners. It's a clumping plant, but it's a wonderful ground cover for that edge, that zone 2 right at the edge of the basin. The more water it gets, the more strawberries it produces for me, and it's an ever-bearing plant. So that's another one that I love to bring into designs, especially in gardens that are at schools and people's houses with small small children because it's a wonderful overlap of there's some native plants, but even if they're not native, when they're nourishing us, I think that's a really wonderful way to connect to our landscape and realize that ultimately the rain that's coming down and the water that's coming down is what is providing us with our food as well as, you know, not just the